I often ask my trainees a question. What does the introduction section do in a life science paper? What is the role of the introduction section? They will give me many answers. They range from the very naive answer by the inexperienced trainees to some specific answers by more experienced trainees. The number of the answers and the quality of the answers seem to depend on their levels of training. In contrast to a wide variety of answers from different groups of trainees, I will use only one sentence to explain the role of the introduction. My single-sentence answer will include most of my trainees' answers, but it is so simple that it will be easy for you to understand what the introduction does in a paper. And I'm sure my answer will greatly help you when you read the introduction section of any paper from now. Do you have an idea about what my answer would be? Let's talk about it today. Hi everyone, welcome to the Foundational Skills in Life Sciences podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Synaptologica. We discuss the skills that life science scholars learn, use, and improve throughout professional activities. Your benefit is expressed in my motto, learn the skills, enjoy academic life. The last episode. Let's briefly review the content of the last episode, episode 53, because its second part will be helpful for our discussion today. In the last episode, we talked about which of the 8 structural components are essential in abstracts. Please remember that the 8 structural components are 1. The background, a brief and broad introduction to the research topic. 2. The known, a known fact or two in the specific field. 3. The unknown, an unknown thing in the specific field. Practically, it can also take the form of the question, the hypothesis, the problem to be investigated in the work, the urgent or unmet need to be addressed, the rationale or the objective of the work. 4. The result overview, a brief overview of the results in the paper. 5. The methods, a concise description of the methods or experimental procedures used in the work. 6. The results, brief descriptions of important results of the work. 7. The conclusions, a brief concluding statement that summarizes the results. And 8. The implications, the interpretations and implications of the work. We talked about 2 levels of essential components in the last episode. One level was the bare minimum. For any abstract, the bare minimum would be the following 3 components. The results component, which is the core of a primary research paper. Then the unknown and the conclusions components, which form the question-answer pair. Another level of essential components was for a readable abstract. The additional essential components would be the following 2 components, the background and the known components. Together with the already mentioned unknown component, these form the background, known, unknown trio. The trio of components creates a natural and logical flow, which is especially helpful for readers outside of the field. So, the background, known, unknown trio improves the readability of the abstract. Today, we will need this background, known, unknown trio for our discussion. Today's episode. As I said in the introduction to today's episode, I often ask my trainees a question. The question is, what does the introduction section do in a paper? In other words, what is the role of the introduction? My goal of asking this question is to characterize the introduction of a paper in the simplest manner so that my trainees will understand what to expect in the introduction when they read it. I would ask the question to 2 broad groups at different training levels. 1. When I ask the trainees who have not read a paper before, for example, undergraduate students, they would usually pause at first. They may have only heard about papers, but they do not seem to know how to answer the question. And then some of the students could start by saying something like, "The introduction section is for telling the readers what the paper is about," or "The introduction section is for introducing the topic," or "The introduction section sets up the paper." These answers are vague to us. 2. When I ask the same question to the trainees who have some experience of reading papers, for example, medical students and graduate students in the PhD courses, their answers would be more specific than the answers by the undergraduate students. For example, their answers could be, "The introduction section is for providing background information about the topic," or "The introduction section is for describing the purpose of the study," or "The introduction section is for giving enough information so that the readers can understand the rest of the paper." If the group includes trainees with much reading experience, more answers would be added. In a group of postdoctoral researchers, for example, I received more than 10 different answers. These answers are more in-depth than those from the medical students and graduate students. Overall, all the answers from my trainees are correct, but they are not satisfactory to me. There are 2 reasons. 1, the responses seem to depend on the experience level of my trainees. And 2, each answer focuses on a small aspect of the introduction section, and each answer does not address the overall role of the introduction. My answer to the question, "What is the role of the introduction?" My answer to the question is very simple. The role of the introduction can be explained in one sentence. I will give you 2 flavors of my answer. The message remains the same. In the first answer, I will be a little broad for giving you the basic idea. The role of the introduction is to elaborate the early statements in the abstract. The introduction does not introduce anything new conceptually. It explains the early part of the abstract with more detailed information so that the readers will understand what the authors wanted to do in the work and why they wanted to do the work. But here you might ask, what do we mean by the early statements in the abstract? What do we mean by the more detailed information? 2. So in the second answer, I will be more specific about these points than in the first. And this is my single sentence answer to our starting question, what is the role of the introduction? The role of the introduction is to elaborate the background, known, unknown trio of components in the abstract by adding evidence and citing references so that these abstract components become stronger and credible in the author's context. In the abstract, the 3 essential components have already built a logical argument for the research. What is the key background information in relation to this work? That is the background component. What was already known in the field before the work? That would be the known component. And what remains to be known and to be clarified? That is the unknown component. The role of the introduction is to support these statements that appear in the early part of the abstract. In the introduction, the authors explain the details and lend credibility to the logical backbone by citing related references. These are necessary because the abstract is too short, whereas the introduction has enough space. Advantages of my answer, that is our viewpoint. There are at least 3 good things about our viewpoint. The first advantage is that our view about the role of introduction is only one, and so it becomes very simple, and we can remember it very easily, irrespective of trainees' levels. The introduction will explain the background, known, and the unknown trio of components in the abstract in detail. The second advantage is that our view will help us when we read the introduction written by other authors. This is because our simple view will easily guide us what to focus on. Usually, the order of appearance of the three components in the introduction is the same as in the abstract. In other words, the logical flow in the introduction is usually the same as in the abstract. So we can roughly expect what to read in the introduction even before reading it. 3. Our view will also help us greatly when we write the introduction in our papers too. This is because we know what to describe, what to emphasize, and in which order in the introduction. Now, comment. Let me give you one brief comment here. I have emphasized the three abstract components that will be expanded in the introduction. They are the background, the known, and the unknown components. But additional abstract components could be included in the introduction. When they are present, they are usually placed at the end of the introduction. And they could be the result overview, the methods, the conclusions, or the implications components. But whether to add them depends on the author's writing style. And I think the presence or absence of these additional components is not essential for reading the introduction section. This is because of the following two reasons. 1. By the time the readers start reading the introduction, they must have read the abstract already. So they must have at least a vague idea about the overall message described in these additional components in the abstract. 2. Even if those additional components are present in the introduction, they will be described only briefly. So I think it does not matter much whether these additional components are present or not for reading the introduction. Lesson, our viewpoint. In the abstract, the trio of the background, the known, and the unknown components describe the logical backbone of the work, and the role of the introduction is to describe the relevant information about this logical backbone in detail, supported by references. And the components are described usually in the same order as they were presented in the abstract. This viewpoint will make reading the introduction easy. This is our lesson or the viewpoint about the introduction today. We would like to see if this viewpoint is applicable to real papers. From the next episode, we will analyze the introduction of one specific paper as an example. Do you know what the paper would be? Of course, it is our Milestone Article 1, written by the Nobel laureates. We have been reading the abstract of the paper over many episodes. Let's stick with this paper and read its introduction. Your action. In your mind, what is the role of the introduction in a paper? Were you thinking about a role different from what we have discussed today? There are no right or wrong ideas about the roles. I would like to hear from you. Please tell me what you think in an email. My email address is ideas@synaptologica.com. Thank you for joining me in today's episode of Foundational Skills in Life Sciences. I'm Dr. Synaptologica. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.